If someone had whispered to Alice, a devoted wife and loving mother of 2 children, that she would celebrate the new year in an unfamiliar environment and sleep in someone else's bed, she would have dismissed it as pure fiction. For many years, the celebration of the new year was their cherished tradition. They gathered in the large house of her husband's relatives at a table bursting with festive delicacies. Closer to midnight, an antique armchair was taken out of the bedroom, in which a precious relic was kept, which they inherited from their grandfather, and they listened attentively to the president's speech. After that, a fun TV night would begin, while their son dozed by the sparkling Christmas tree, eagerly awaiting the arrival of Santa Claus with his precious gifts. Lately, Alice has been tormented by constant reflections. Has boredom seeped into their once passionate life? She longed for her husband to shower her with affectionate words again, calling her the epitome of beauty. Fearing that their love was gradually dissipating into the routine of everyday life, she longed for a change. One day, she even suggested to him, "Why don't we go out together?" He gave her a longing look and replied, "Why not? If everything is so good, it might offend my parents in their presence." And so the years went on. 6 months ago, Alice changed jobs and found great satisfaction in her new team. It was an extensive modern company. There was only 1 week left until the end of the year, and the boss announced that the CEO had invited all employees to celebrate the new year in a restaurant in the capital, and the company would cover all expenses. Excitement hung in the air as the employees put aside their work and gathered together to discuss the joys of the upcoming corporate holiday. Everyone except Alice. She sat in front of her computer screen, lost in thought, thinking about how to discuss this topic at home without causing objections from her husband and without offending his parents. That evening, during their dinner together, she casually dropped the news, saying, "Oh, and all my colleagues are going to New York for a corporate party." Her husband looked into her sad eyes, and suddenly their daughter stood up for her mother, firmly stating, "Go, Mom, and while you're there, please buy me a new mobile phone." Her husband sighed and reluctantly agreed. Staff from the capital city were accommodated in pre-arranged hotel quarters, provided some downtime to freshen up and unwind. Around 9 p.m., they were escorted in a shuttle to a quaint Italian eatery. The establishment's owner, a colleague of the CEO, welcomed the party warmly at the entrance. Gathered around a grand table, employees and executives alike enjoyed the bubbly effervescence of champagne while the CEO delivered a rousing address, recounting the company's remarkable journey through the year, celebrating triumphs and acknowledging setbacks. As his words concluded, live melodies filled the air, prompting seats to shuffle as attendees took to the dance floor. Amid the general merriment, Alice, comfortably perched on the high back of a chair, found her gaze riveted on the charming watercolor landscapes of the Italian countryside decorating the walls. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted when a hand gently touched her hand, which was lying on the table. Startled, she straightened up abruptly and looked up only to meet the gaze of a tall, olive-skinned young man in his mid-20s, who was looking at her with a mischievous smile and a piercing, enthusiastic gaze. Clearly Italian, she thought briefly, before he surprised her by asking in impeccable Hindi, "Why doesn't Madame like the dance floor? Does she not like music?" "For some unknown reason," she uttered. The Italian gentleman proceeded towards the musicians, and a melodic tune resonated from the speakers, announcing, "This enchanting melody is dedicated to the captivating lady dressed in scarlet." It was at that moment when Alice realized that she was the sole possessor of that breathtaking attire. The gazes of the entire staff fixated upon her as she stood amidst a sea of faces. Suddenly, the Italian gentleman materialized by her side, his countenance adorned with a wide grin, his hand extended graciously, beckoning her to join him in a dance. In a soft undertone, the silver-haired soloist serenaded tales of love, with unwavering trust in her newfound companion. Alice twirled gracefully across the dance floor. He proved to be an exceptional partner, leading with effortless grace. As the employees whirled past and red-boughed Christmas trees lined the hall, Everything blended into a seamless whirlwind. In that moment, Alice felt akin to Brielle at her inaugural ball, suspended in midair, barely touching ground, oblivious to her surroundings, captivated solely by the radiance and adulation in his eyes. "Let's escape," murmured the Italian, his voice barely audible over the fading music, still clasping her hand firmly. "How could I possibly? What would people say?" She hesitated. "Simply excuse yourself, citing exhaustion. Express your gratitude, and slip into the corridor," he suggested smoothly, as he brushed his lips against her hair, tightened his grip on her fingers for a fleeting moment. And then, releasing her, he swiftly exited the ballroom. Alice stood there, bewildered, the image of her tranquil and ever-proper husband flashing through her mind. She glanced around at her colleagues, aware that her abrupt departure wouldn't go unnoticed, would definitely stir some speculation. Yet her body seemed to rebel against her rational thoughts. Her spirit, freshly liberated and yearning to soar once more, ached plaintively. Alice, always the paradigm of a dutiful wife and mother to two, decided to cast aside societal norms and boldly followed him out. The purpose of their trip was a spacious apartment located at the very top of a skyscraper, the air in which was filled with the aromas of fresh lime trees and tobacco smoke. Outside the huge window, decorated with festive lights, the city landscape sparkled like a huge diorama. The Italian returned with crystal glasses, a bottle of red wine, and a vase filled to the brim with exotic fruits. They settled down on a luxurious azure carpet and drank to the advent of the new year, immersed in the shimmering embrace of the city. Setting her glass down, Alice experienced the sensation of his lips and hands caressing her body, and the world around her erupted into a dazzling display of shimmering stars. "Happy New Year," she murmured to herself, allowing herself to be consumed by the intensity of her emotions. And then, they found themselves nestled on a spacious bed adorned with a lavish canopy and silken sheets. With gentle strokes, he traced the contours of her shoulders and whispered, "You are the epitome of beauty, my dear. Do you know that?" Alice couldn't help but smile, and he continued, "You're simply enchanting, especially when you cast your lashes downward and grace me with your lovely smile. If only I were a poet, I would compose verses dedicated to you, just as Dante did for his beloved Beatrice." As morning dawned, Alice slowly awakened to the sound of a door creaking open and muted activity in the hallway. "I wonder where he's disappeared to," she mused, still drowsy, but deciding to keep her eyes closed a while longer. Suddenly, the Italian gentleman entered the room, manifesting a quiet presence as he placed something gently on the pillow beside her, then slipped away just as silently. Curiosity got the better of her, prompting her to open her eyes and discover a whimsical toy rabbit donning a vibrant red cap. Adorning one ear was a delicate hoop featuring a clear gem sculpted into a tear shape. The Italian re-entered the chamber, bearing a modest platter with twin cups of coffee seated atop. Depositing the platter upon the bed, he nestled beside it, exclaiming with a genuine grin, "Happy New Year." He then warmly added, "On the eve of January 1st, Old Saint Nick delights us all with gifts, as you're undoubtedly aware. And what treasures did he fetch for you? He bestowed upon me the most enthralling lady and the most enchanting evening one could ever envision throughout the year," he declared. In that moment, he tenderly captured her left hand, easing a ring onto her finger. Instantaneously, the diamond awoke, radiating bursts of light. However, Alice's thoughts drifted towards chaos. She yearned to gaze into his radiant, eager eyes and confess, "Are you aware of my age? That I'm wedded with children? That we're still battling the bank loan? And how, pray tell, am I to justify the origins and exorbitant price of this ring to my husband, not to mention his mother?" But by the will of fate, as soon as the atmosphere was established, a sudden phone call broke the calm. The Italian apologized in response and retired to the next room. Meanwhile, Alice, who had not taken her eyes off her dress, decided to wrap herself in a silk sheet before going to the window. A noisy symphony unfolded below. Pedestrians hurried to their destination. Cars and buses constantly collided with each other. Sensing his presence, the Italian hugged her and gently put his hands on her shoulders. At that moment, a slight tremor ran through her knees, as if causing a cascade of sensations. Without taking her eyes off the window, she muttered softly, "I have to go," and gracefully headed for the bathroom. Eventually emerging, she found the Italian seated in a nearby chair, leisurely puffing on a cigarette. Her dress and cape, meticulously arranged, lay adorning the coffee table. "Tonight, I'll escort you to the train station," he declared with an air of finality. However, Alice swiftly interjected, "There's no need. I had intended to embark on a shopping expedition. We must procure gifts." In response, the Italian rose from his seat, his tone brooking no disagreement. "Then we shall venture forth as shopping companions. I trust the enchanting lady harbors no objections." And so Alice, garbed elegantly in her evening attire and adorned with graceful shoes, embarked on a leisurely promenade through the city's emporiums, accompanied by her newfound companion. The Italian gentleman drove her right up to the front of the hotel where Alice was lodging. He turned to face her and gazed at her intently for what felt like an eternity, then leaned in and murmured, "You are the most stunning woman. Remember that." Alice, almost in a trance, barely moved as she briefly brushed his fervent lips with hers before reaching for her luggage in the back seat, hopping out of the car, and slipping through the open door without looking back. On the train, Madeleine, the bookkeeper, sidled up to her and, lowering her voice to a whisper, inquired, "So, what's the deal with the general's son?" Alice was taken aback. "Whose son?" Madeleine narrowed her eyes. "The one you danced with at the restaurant. And then you vanished. Wasn't that the director's kid?" Alice replied, "We danced, and then he took off. I haven't seen him since." Madeleine was visibly let down, mumbling about how Alice had let a golden opportunity slip through her fingers. Yet, her interest waning, she quickly clammed up. The train arrived early in the morning. Standing on the platform, Alice noticed her husband approaching her with a huge bouquet of flowers. "What brings you here so early?" she asked. Her husband's smile widened as he replied, "I've come to greet the woman I adore." Surprised, Alice exclaimed, "But we didn't plan to meet." Ian grinned and explained, "I know, but I've missed you so much and realized it's been too long since I last gave you flowers. There you are." Alice couldn't believe her eyes. After all these years, he remembered her love of orange gerberas. Overwhelmed with emotion, she confessed, "My love, I've been waiting for these signs of attention from you. In fact, I even came to New York in search of a break from these dreary, mundane days." And then Before Alice could finish, her husband grabbed her hands and whispered, "Darling, spare me your words. I'm a fool. Looking at you, I realize that you are the most amazing woman in the world. I love you deeply." With tears in her eyes, Alice hugged her husband. These were the very words she had always dreamed of hearing, especially from her dear and adored husband.